Now, to show us the omni-channel way, please welcome our group on stage who are going to be talking in a panel discussion on this subject. Please welcome.
So a quick introduction. I'm Akshay Jayaprakashan. I'm an associate partner at Redseer Strategy Consultants. We are a strategy consulting firm focused on the new age startup ecosystem. We could do a quick round of introductions to start off.
Darine Sabbagh, the managing director of Golden Scent. We're the biggest perfume e-commerce in the region and one of the oldest, so this is our 9th year, operating out of Saudi. Yes.
Thanks, Darine. Afternoon, everybody. I'm David Hardman-Evans. I lead global business development for Ocado. Those who are less familiar with us, we're engaged in the grocery space. We started as an online grocery business some 22 years ago. In the intervening years, we have built our own effectively end-to-end e-commerce and fulfillment solutions for grocery, which we now partner with global grocers around the world, providing that technology to them.
Afsal?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Afsal Salo, the co-founder CEO of BestDoc. I believe I'm the odd man out. I come from health tech. I've been a retailer for 14 years before I started BestDoc. Been running this for the last 6 years. It's exciting to be here sharing our lessons in handling patient experience at 200 plus hospitals in India and Middle East. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me in here and being part of this amazing panel. I'm coming from e-commerce mainly. I haven't worked anywhere else. So I worked in Amazon back in UK, then also in Souk.com, which most of you might know in the region, and now currently in Noon, heading IT. So I'm the IT guy, and exciting to be part of the panel and see how it goes.
Great, thank you, everyone. So to start off the discussion, I think the first question that I have, which is a common question to all our panelists, is that omnichannel was a term that was used even pre-pandemic. But the pandemic, helped the industry take giant strides in terms of the whole digitization journey. So when you look back a couple of years, what are the 1-2 key highlights that you can talk about in each of your industries? Okay, I'll go with Peter first, yeah.
I'll speak on. Thank you very much for the question. So I think the one obvious thing is what has happened, throughout the pandemic. It has really fast-tracked many organizations to push the digital transformation because they've seen how big of an impact it was when suddenly the world has shut down and some of the systems were not available as they should be. So some of your data was local, or you had it on a server which you could not access. So I'm talking purely from IT perspective. It was something which pushed many organizations, and it even goes in obviously in organizations already having a digital strategy. So digital first approach, getting your data organized and making sure that the data is available at any point of time. And of course, the omnichannel experience where you have everything in the palm of your hand. I think the accessibility of the services which are there, was the number one thing which has been pushed. And like I said, taking the digital first approach was very important because those who have done it prior to pandemic haven't seen such an impact. For those who haven't.
Great. Afsal, you want to add something from the healthcare space?
So when it comes to healthcare, we believe that people, patients like us, or otherwise people who are caretakers, they need to have this human interaction, face-to-face interaction. When COVID happened, we were looking at the outpatient experience, and that is when we saw everything going down, because people were scared to come to hospitals. And that was the first time when the hospitals, healthcare providers were forced to look at digital technologies in terms of transforming their operations. So we were at the forefront of what was happening. 2 trends which we noticed, which earlier would have been existent in other industries like banking, retail. What we saw was the entire industry went paperless, which was very tough because people used to carry records, whether it's prescriptions, lab reports, everything was on paper, and suddenly it became paperless because of everything requiring to be contactless. So contactless and paperless, these are the 2 trends which we noticed during the pandemic, and we were able to push a lot of hospitals, providers to move that way. For example, one of our premium hospitals in Mumbai, in India, they were not ready to give up the patient interaction on a face-to-face person, but we were able to make sure that everything is done on a digital fashion from the time they take appointments to payments to meeting the doctor and then getting out. They were not interacting with anyone other than the doctor. We had geofencing done, we had UPI, which is QR code-based payments. A lot of innovations were brought in at that time to reduce the contact, and we are happy to see some of them sticking now. So I believe healthcare has been a benefactor of COVID-induced digital transformation.
Very interesting, absolutely. I think healthcare is definitely an industry that's really benefited from COVID in terms of digitization. Next, I'd like to hear, David, your views, probably from the grocery space, supply chains. Yeah.
Sure. So omnichannel is a very interesting term because it kind of means different things to different people. And for me, it's really about the customer. And ironically, we are a pure play online grocer, so we are actually the one set of people who won't be omnichannel. But all the partners we work with around the globe are. And certainly what happened during the pandemic is their engagement with their customer had to move into digital channels. It went online in such a massive way. I mean, just in this room, could I ask for a show of hands for people who might have shopped online for their groceries for the first time as a result of the pandemic? Anybody here? There's a few people. Because actually what it did was drive an awful lot of people who they might have thought they'd shop online, but hadn't tried it, but they were forced to. And we saw in multiple markets the same growth in the matter of months in online grocery shopping that we saw in the previous 20 years. So that was the scale that we saw. However, I think as we go through, what does that mean from an omni-channel perspective? How do we give a common experience to the customer as a result of some of the digital developments? And I think this is where digitization in the store to give the customer that same experience, whether it's through promotional activity, whether it's through pricing, whether in terms of dynamic pricing, whether it's in terms of assortment, is something everybody needs to now start taking account of. I think there's two things that really stand out in terms of features here. One is the increasing importance and actually coming to the fore of the use of data. And that's the use of data in terms of driving that customer experience across whichever channel you are choosing to use, whether it's in store, whether it's online, or whether it's a hybrid. The other is actually thinking around your operations, because the natural thing to do for grocers when they were going online, and particularly scaling up very rapidly, was to use their existing store estate or to open a manual dark store. But actually, that, from an economics perspective, that's very challenging. Now, I think online is clearly here to stay. What I think increasing numbers of grocers are now considering is, how do we make this sustainable? I either stop this activity or reduce it, therefore I lose market share, or I have to find a more sustainable way to do it. So I think some of the investment that they'll be looking for in the future is all about driving efficiency. So there's two parts. How do I make that customer experience through the use of data even better? But how do I drive the efficiency?
Got it. Very interesting. And grocery is a segment that saw a lot of growth within the retail categories during the pandemic. Next, Darren, anything from the beauty space?
Sure. I'll first mention how we saw the market change within the pandemic in general, and then talk about our specific example. So pre-pandemic, we were always preaching to our brands and partners the omni-channel approach, and then you have to be online, right? And many luxury brands are really not into that and cautious about it. And while many were preaching and talking the talk, let's say that we are an omni-channel brand, we will go omni-channel, but not so many were walking the walk. Yeah. And then they had to run to it through the pandemic, obviously. We were quite happy with that. But also the idea of the omnichannel is really that the lines will be blurred, right? There will not be this discussion of online we do this, offline we do this. It's about the whole experience of the customer and the journey. And this is where we felt that the lines are blurring, but also the friction points are getting removed. So there's been a lot of innovation in the space of payments, for example, to reduce cash on delivery, which was a huge pain for us as an online retailer. We've also had to innovate in many more ways for the customer to have a similar experience in terms of experiencing the product, but without having a physical interaction with it. So we had to invent different ways, like home trial kits, or investing more maybe in content, or investing more in different resources across the company to really deliver this seamless experience across the board.
Got it. Very interesting. And this home trials thing picked up a lot in the luxury segment also, I guess, right? Great. Very interesting points of view from everyone. Now, my next question is, now with the pandemic behind us, a lot of consumers are flocking back to the offline channels. So how do you see the role of digital evolve in this kind of context?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. I think it still reinforces the view that, obviously the digital approach needs to be there. So a lot of the digital transformation which has happened through the pandemic is still going ahead, but at the same time, as you already mentioned very clearly, is that giving that same experience in store, so that the users are not feeling that, no, okay, come on, now we are changing back, but we're having the same experience when we're going to the store. And there's different ways in different industries to do it, but that is something which has been seen quite a lot. I don't want to name a few of my experiences recently. It was actually, we were just discussing it today. I was in one of the stores yesterday, and it was just amazing experience. You come in, it was a completely, there was no interaction with anybody actually. It was only a security guy, and I scanned my items, everything got picked up. It showed me what I had, then I could just return it back. I could even pay it there, and there was no need to actually physically scan anything. So I think that's one of the examples, which I think kind of speaks for itself, because at the same time you are bringing that experience into the store. And that is something which customers are looking for. And of course, it's a mix as well, because different customers prefer different things. So it's to ensure that that experience is created in those different venues where you can capture those customers so they don't go away. I think that's the key to it, and we are seeing it across the board. And you can see it either in, it's in a standard e-commerce, groceries, on-demand delivery, in a quick commerce, where you're getting delivery in 15 minutes. I think, that's something which also is amazing. But I think, in a nutshell, it's bringing that experience which you had online, which, should be amazing, bringing it back to the stores and going it hands to hands, and improving that experience going forward.
Very interesting. The 15 minutes delivery is quite, tremendous actually. The ability to deliver in 15 minutes is really very interesting. Healthcare?
Yeah. Before I get into healthcare, actually the 15-minute delivery is something which is exciting. I would love to touch upon a story. So I used to run a company called Deliver, which was in the hyperlocal e-commerce space about 12 years back in India. And we started with the promise of 30 minutes delivery. That's 20, we would say that we would look at any household which is in a 30-minute radius, and then we will go and then do that delivery. And then my company got acquired by Big Basket. Big Basket is one of India's largest e-grocer, if you know it. And they said 30 minutes is too tough for us, one, in terms of unit economics. Second, the customers are not asking for it. So I had a very good, healthy debate with the board, including my boss, who is Hari Menon, who is the CEO, saying that we should actually try to reduce that. And it went from 30 to 60. That was what happened in 2015. And then when the market evolved, now India has got multiple startups which are doing this 10-minute delivery. I'm sure you would have heard about some of them,
Yes.
Septo.
Blinkit.
So they have just changed the market, and everyone now has adapted. So Big Basket has now got a business called BB Now, which is 10 minutes. So you can see how the market is actually forcing. These are market forces which are changing the way in which people who are not able to adapt would move, have to be either very nimble or will be forced to move. Coming back to healthcare, what I saw was that after COVID, we thought that a lot of digital adoption which has happened would stay, but doctors being doctors, actually I'm son of two doctors, so I've tried my level best to actually see how tech adoption can happen in that community. And I have seen that when you have the people who are delivering a service not ready to adopt technology as easily as maybe in other sectors, it's going to be ways or workarounds which we'll have to design, devise to make sure that you're able to give an omnichannel experience. So when it comes to hospital visits, what we have seen is people are very comfortable now taking appointments online or on an app, as opposed to people calling a call center earlier. That has changed. But when they reach the hospital, what they are doing is a lot of things, again, have to be done with an interaction. So we are trying to weave an omnichannel experience where people would do certain things on their mobile phone. Once they reach, they have to do something which is on the devices which are there in the hospital or in person. And then they move to the doctor's room where you will have to make sure that that in-person communication, like the store's equivalent, you need to have that personalized experience provided. And then after that, everything we are trying to digitize, whether it is reports, payments, feedback, follow-ups. So we are trying to make sure that we are able to get them back onto the digital journey. An example to quote here is Epic, which is one of the largest EHR systems in the world, based out of US. They did a study between March 2020 and October 22 on about 19 million patient visits. And they found that 61% of those patients, they didn't need a doctor visit in the next 90 days after an online consultation. So I've been showing that report to a lot of clients, but they're still saying that doctors want to meet the patients, and hence the store or offline equivalent experience is what is being promoted, but hopefully we would see tailwinds in the mix of online, offline future.
Yeah, so I think the first time diagnosis always has to be with a physical examination, but follow-ups could go online more and more in the future, I guess. Fair enough. David?
So I think, following on from the previous question and your question here in terms of what does digital mean for the future, it's very clear, and COVID helped to consolidate this, that increasingly consumers are engaging digitally. They may still be purchasing in the store, they may purchase online, but they're engaging digitally, and that has a lot of ramifications for the way retailers might think around that engagement. It will have ramifications for the way they think around pricing, as pricing has suddenly become very transparent. Thinking around personalization, but and again, going back to how they use the data. It also has ramifications for the way that product manufacturers think about reaching and promoting their products. Because if the end consumer is engaging digitally, some of the increasingly also online, it changes the way they may start to think about their media spend. There's been a lot written about retail media and the opportunity there for retailers. It's something that the Ocado business in the UK has been doing for the last 15, 20 years, and it is a significant part of their revenue today. But I think it is that whole ability for the retailer now to influence the consumer much more in buying habits and what to purchase. So I think there's a lot of ramifications there. I think you're right. We've seen across markets a little bit of a moderation from the peak of the COVID period. But I think we've sort of seen it at best plateau now and starting to see the first signs of growing again, but from a much higher base than we were pre-COVID. I think the last thing I would say is that, and several of our partners have publicly stated this, their best customers are those who shop in store and shop online, in terms of their loyalty and in terms of their aggregate spend. They are the best customers for them.
Understood. I think while the transactions majority will always stay offline, from a discovery and influence standpoint, online channels will always play a much larger role.
I think to add to what David was saying, traditionally what everyone has thought about retail is that, okay, online is the fun marketing side, but the transactions will happen in stores. Let's grow through opening more stores and so on. But the pandemic also pushed the way the consumer behaves. And now in a lot of the customer journeys, maybe the offline is actually the marketing bit, where they get to play with the product, discover it for us, smell it sometimes in other stores, and then they do their research on pricing, where can they get the best deal, and many times they close the transaction offline. So this is a big shift now, and this is why omnichannel is so critical to the future.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So now I have a few specific questions for each of you. First, Peter. Again, our topic of discussion is omnichannel. So very fundamentally, why is omnichannel experience important, and how did the digital transformation in the industry help fast-track the implementation of it from your IT experience here?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think this is a very good question, which I always like to dive deep into. I think it's like every customer is, customers are critical, they are trying to get the best experience, and that experience, when they don't get it, they're also very critical to kind of move away, and then kind of not coming back to your platform when one of that experience happens. So I think when it comes to omnichannel, from my perspective, looking from the IT side, is making sure that experience which they're having is not interrupted. So, when the infrastructure is being set up on the background, it needs to be seamless. It needs to be the last thing which you, as obviously there's different departments in a company, that you need to be looking at, right? It needs to be running seamlessly for you, so you don't need to think about it like, okay, what's going to happen if we're going to have this sale? Is it going to go down? Do we have enough capacity? Did we plan enough for that? That should be done from the IT perspective, capacity planned, and knowing it from the experience that, how, and taking, of course, the advantage of today's technologies, obviously, different cloud providers, having the digital first approach, making sure that the data is available at any point of time, and an infrastructure is obviously with a 99% uptime. So I think that's number one. In terms of, the digital transformation, it's something which is obviously it's a buzzword as well. It's almost like prior to AI, digital transformation was the biggest buzzword, right? I think it's important one is about making the digital transformation, but at the same time, the willingness to actually do it, and looking at the areas of the business which are nice to have versus the must-have, right? So focusing on the must-haves, which is going to make an actual impact in your company, but on the end of the day, impact to the customer in a positive way. I think that's the focus should be, and that's what also is pushing those channels, to have that seamless experience. When you have that, like I said, that experience of I like to measure it the way of how many clicks does it actually take for a customer to do something, right? To reach the destination what they are looking for. I think that's a key. So putting that into perspective, if I'm looking at, I'm searching for something, if it takes me, and I'm very critical myself, if it takes me more than a minute to look for something, that's from my personal experience, I usually look somewhere else, so kind of limiting that time down, and that comes down to those clicks as well, and the menus, how everything is organized, that definitely makes a key. It might sound as a very small thing, but eventually, it makes a huge difference, and as a customer, eventually it's rewarding on the end of the day when they have that positive experience.
Got it. I think very interesting. Next to healthcare. So Bestdog has applications across the value chain within healthcare. So what are the most interesting use cases that you've seen gain a lot of traction over the last few years?
So we have been on health tech SaaS platform providing hospitals with various touchpoint solutions. So if you look at the healthcare, there are two types of customers: outpatients who come for just doctor visit, and then there are hospitalization inpatients. So we looked at both of these patient care journeys, and then we found that the inpatient, where someone gets admitted and they stay for a few days and then they get discharged, that's when actually there is a lot more engagement which was happening. And that is where we looked at how we can improve that patient experience or customer experience. And we realized that it's not only the patient. That is another learning for us, because when it was in e-commerce, it could be the consumer customer, whereas here it's the family member, the caretaker, the person who is around the patient who is actually doing most of the actions. So we wanted to make sure that it's as easy for that person to navigate the various things which they need to do when they are in till they get out. And that's when we discovered that one size fit all would not work. Because if you look at most of the touch points, they're all in English and maybe in Arabic in this part of the world. But we realized that there's an opportunity for us to segment the customers into the languages which they speak, the devices which they use, as well as the channels which they use. So we have, for example, a patient concierge product, which is there in hospitals, which is there in 9 languages, including Russian and Arabic. We are present in the Middle East, and that's why we have Russian. And we have patient feedback, which is done in 22 languages, because of India being a nation of hundreds of languages. So that is the way we are able to improve the engagement. The surveys or the patient feedback, which used to be 3% pre-best doc, we have been able to take it to 20% because people started suddenly engaging. WhatsApp has been a very successful communication channel. So engagement through the right channel, the right modality, and the right language has helped us bring in a lot more insights to the providers, and that's what I believe the retailers also would be looking forward in terms of understanding the customers and then trying to personalize their experience.
Very interesting. Thank you for that, Afsal. Next to David, grocery, one of my favorite segments, actually. So grocery is a segment that grew 4 to 5 times in the online channel over the last couple of years. But this growth has been not in the most efficient manner, right? So supply chains have been quickly scaled up, and there have been a lot of inefficiencies through it. So learning from your experience in other evolved markets, what are the changes that are required in the region to make it a more profitable and sustainable offering?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I alluded to this in one of the previous questions, that actually COVID drove huge growth in top line, and there was an awful lot of how do we get capacity very quickly. And the instant way of doing this was to utilize stores or open a manual warehouse. But I think when you're looking at supply chain, you need to look more broadly at the supply chain, because there's obviously, from a grocer's perspective, there's a part of the supply chain that comes into you in the inbound from your suppliers. And I think one of the things, particularly perhaps in some of the markets out here in the Middle East, and particularly where we're sitting right now in Dubai, there is a lot more of the import of particularly fresh produce, and there's huge waste in the food chain before it even gets to the point of sale with the grocer. So things that importers, distributors, wholesalers can do to help preserve the quality, the life of product is one thing. Coming back to the grocers themselves, I think it's, the grocers the next phase now is, how do I make this more efficient? How do I make it sustainable while still doing a great job or an even better job for the customer? And some of that is around making sure you've got suitable assets. So suitable assets may not be to do it out of a store. Maybe to do it out of a store, or some it's out of a store. But a suitable asset is something that you can drive more efficiency through. In our own business, and the business and the technology we provide to partners enables us to build a variety of different types of asset, whether that's from a fully automated fulfillment center at large scale to do large catchments, whether it's a network of smaller automated fulfillment centers, whether it's enabling micro fulfillment centers, which are really suited for on-demand, or whether it's to enable on the same platform manual fulfillment out of stores and dark stores. So getting the right asset, the right mix of assets, because they can all be used as an integrated network. But then there's, what else can I do to take out cost? So I think this, again, I've touched on this earlier, the use of the power of data to help with predictability and reducing waste, for example. So as one example, in the UK retail business, we run over 20 million demand forecasts a day to help predict with much more accuracy what stock we think we're going to need and when. And that flows back up through the supply chain in terms of inventory management and ordering. Now, what that really does is a number of things for the customer, i.e. it reduces the incidence, the likelihood you're going to have out of stocks. It drives freshness, and it also drives down, it reduces waste, particularly in the fresh product. So use of data and predictive algorithms to help drive a lot of that efficiency. So I think there's a number of things that grocers can be thinking about in terms of how do I drive that efficiency but still maintain or even improve what's good for the customer.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I can see the timer ticking over there. So the last question from my end, and another very interesting aspect, So consumers want online shopping to be a more immersive experience right now, and you've seen live commerce coming in, gamification, user-generated content, etc. So what are some of the highlights that you would like to share from your experiences in this aspect?
Right. I'll try to keep it short for the sake
No,
of
please,
time. I think from our end, user-generated content was something that we focused on throughout those 9 years, be it through using influencers, but also through incentivizing customers to talk about us. So like some of the basic things we designed within the brand is, let's say, the box. The box has to be unique, colorful, the unboxing experience has to be special. We maybe get some stickers or some gifts and also some samples to try. All of this to incentivize customers to talk more about us. And what we really know from data and so many studies is that every bit of social proof counts. So in many studies by Google, for example, when presented by a traditional brand with less reviews and less content, and an unknown contender, a fictive brand, people were likely to choose the unknown contender if they had more social proof, more reviews, more photos, more content. And this is something for us, as someone who sells perfumes, an ephemeral thing online, very critical that we focus on. But it's very important to think how to add it to the context of the local customer. So for example, live shows are very popular in China, and I think many retailers in the region have also tried to play with the idea, but no one has reached the same results that they have in Asia. We found a few tricks around it, but it's about how to integrate the content within the regular streams of things that are happening. I think we still haven't seen live shopping at the extent that it's on Taobao, for example, right?
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much, everyone, for your valuable insight. I hope the audience also found the discussion very insightful. Thank you very much. I think we can end the session with that. Cheers. Thank you.